tiny choices today, why do they matter so much tomorrow? It's funny, isn't it? How often we look at our lives, at where we've ended up, and think about the big decisions, the career move, the house, the family. Those monumental, life-altering moments that stand out like signposts. But if you really lean into it, if you quiet the noise and just observe, you start to see something else entirely. You begin to notice that the vast majority of our current reality, the way we spend our days, the person we've become, isn't really forged in those grand dramatic pronouncements. It's built brick by tiny brick in the small, almost invisible choices we make every single day. I was rushing through the kitchen this morning, trying to get my youngest's breakfast ready, while simultaneously answering an email from work and trying to remember if I'd packed my lunch. Just a typical Tuesday. You know the drill. And in that whirlwind, I noticed a tiny pile of clothes that had somehow migrated from the laundry room to the hallway, almost tripping me. It was nothing, really, just a small thing. But then I thought about how that pile started. Probably one shirt, then a pair of socks, then another shirt I was too tired to put away last night. Each one a minute decision, a momentary lapse, or a conscious deferral. And suddenly, there's a pile. It's a small, inconsequential example, but it hit me. Life is just an accumulation of these small things. Centuries ago, Epictetus, that brilliant, no-nonsense Stoic philosopher, offered us a simple but profound truth. He essentially said, "You become what you give your attention to." It's not some mystical idea, just a stark, practical observation. Our lives aren't shaped by our grand intentions, by the bullet point list of resolutions we make in January, or by the dreams we vaguely hold on to. No, the shape of our lives is determined by the small, repeated choices that quietly guide us each day. If I give my attention to mindlessly scrolling on my phone, that's what I become, little by little, a scroller. If I give my attention to reading a few pages of a book before bed, even when tired, then I become, eventually, a reader. It's a beautiful, almost startling echo when you pick up a book like James Clear's Atomic Habits. Here, a modern voice, speaking the language of psychology and behavior, arrives at precisely the same conclusion. Clear unpacks this ancient wisdom with a clear, almost clinical precision, showing us how these atomic habits, these incredibly tiny, almost imperceptible changes, are the fundamental units of our personal growth, or indeed our stagnation. He doesn't just tell us to try harder. He gives us a framework for understanding why we do what we do, and how we can subtly yet powerfully re-engineer our daily patterns. Both Epictetus and Clear, separated by millennia, meet at this crucial point. Who we are becoming is not written in the bold headlines of our life story, but in the quiet, unassuming prose of the patterns we live each day. Think about it. We often aspire to be better, a better parent, a more engaged partner, a more productive employee, a healthier person. These aspirations are wonderful, necessary even. But they can also feel incredibly daunting when you're staring at a mountain of emails, a pile of bills, a toddler who just discovered how to climb the kitchen counter, and you're also trying to figure out dinner. The idea of becoming a better person can feel like an impossible task. It's overwhelming. And that's often where we falter. We aim for the moon, miss, and then feel defeated by the enormity of the gap between our current self and our aspirational self. But what if the path to that better self isn't a single heroic leap, but a series of minuscule, almost trivial steps? Epictetus would remind us that our internal world, our thoughts, our choices, our attention, is the only thing truly within our control. Everything else is external, indifferent to our desires. And James Clear takes that internal control and translates it into actionable strategies for shaping our habits. He makes a compelling case that if you want to predict your future, you don't look at your goals. You look at your systems. And your systems are nothing more than your daily habits, the things you give your attention to, repeatedly. It's an idea that resonates deeply with me, especially navigating the daily grind. I remember a period not too long ago where I felt like I was constantly treading water at work. Deadlines piled up, and I'd often end my day feeling like I'd been busy, but hadn't actually moved the needle on anything important. I was giving my attention to the urgent, but not necessarily the important. My days were a series of reactions, not deliberate actions. My habit, if you could call it that, was to tackle whatever screamed loudest, And ironically, that just created more screaming. It was exhausting. Reflecting on Epictetus, I realized my attention was scattered, pulled in 100 directions by things I couldn't control. Unexpected client requests, a sudden server outage, the endless notifications. But what I could control was where I consciously directed my attention. Where was my focus going? Was it truly on the task at hand, or was it half-hearted, easily distracted? Atomic Habits provided the practical playbook for this realization. It wasn't about working harder or even longer, but about being more deliberate with those tiny choices, those micro decisions that ultimately dictate my productivity and my peace of mind. For example, I started with something ridiculously small. Instead of immediately opening my email first thing in the morning, I decided I would open my project management tool and identify the single most important task for the day and work on it for just 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes. It felt negligible. But those 15 minutes repeated daily started to add up. I was giving my attention, deliberately, to the most important thing before the external world had a chance to hijack my focus. And the surprising thing? It wasn't just about getting that one task done. It was about building a new identity. I am someone who tackles important tasks first. That's a powerful shift, far more than just ticking off a box. The beauty of this perspective, both ancient and modern, is its accessibility. You don't need grand gestures or massive overhauls to begin. You don't need to wait for a new year or a personal crisis. The power lies in the present moment, in the next tiny choice you make. Will you pick up the phone or pick up the book? Will you scroll mindlessly or spend 5 minutes on a focused task? Will you defer that small chore or just do it right now? Each of these is a decision about what you are giving your attention to, and thus what you are becoming. And it's this quiet, compounding power of the insignificant that truly shapes our lives. It's about understanding that the person you want to be tomorrow is already being built by the habits you choose today, one tiny brick at a time, often without you even fully realizing it, until you look back and see the structure you've created. Part 2. Atomic Habits, Small Steps, Big Transformation. That quiet compounding power of the insignificant is precisely what James Clear meticulously lays out in Atomic Habits. This isn't one of those self-help books promising a complete life makeover by next Tuesday, leaving you feeling inspired for a day before the motivation evaporates. No, Clear's genius, and the reason this book has resonated with so many of us navigating the complex waters of modern life, is its deceptively simple, yet profoundly effective message. True, lasting transformation doesn't come from some seismic breakthrough or a single heroic act, but from the cumulative effect of small habits repeated daily. It's about understanding that who you are in 5, 10, 20 years' time isn't sculpted by a single heroic effort, but by the quiet, almost invisible, daily chiseling of your routines. Clear doesn't suggest overhauling your life overnight because, let's be honest, who has the time or the sustained willpower for that? Most of us are already juggling deadlines, school runs, family meals, and the endless stream of notifications. The idea of adding a monumental new commitment often feels like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Instead, Atomic Habits invites you to think smaller, much smaller. It encourages you to look for the tiny choices, the incremental adjustments, the seemingly insignificant actions that, when strung together consistently, become the powerful loom weaving the fabric of your future self. For me, this message arrived at a time when I was feeling perpetually overwhelmed by the sheer number of things I felt I should be doing. I had vague goals: get fitter, be more present with the kids, learn that new coding language. But these goals felt like distant mountains, and my current daily routine felt like a swamp. I'd try to climb, sink a little, and then give up, blaming a lack of motivation or time. Clear's approach felt like a breath of fresh air, shifting my focus from the daunting outcome to the manageable process. He makes a very persuasive argument for focusing on systems rather than just goals. We're often taught to set ambitious goals, right? I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to get that promotion. I want to write a book. These are noble aspirations, markers of progress and ambition. But what Clear points out, and what I've seen play out in my own life time and again, is that focusing solely on the goal can be demotivating when progress isn't linear, or when you inevitably hit a plateau. The goal is the desired outcome, the finish line, but the system is the sum of the small actions you take to get there. It's the daily run, not the finishing line of the marathon. It's the consistent output of clean code, the daily check-in with your team, not just the successful project launch. This idea really clicked for me when I thought about how often I'd set a goal, say, get fit, only to fall off the wagon after a week of intense, unsustainable workouts. The goal was there, but the system was flawed. There was no sustainable daily practice, no manageable routine that could weather the storms of a busy week. Stoicism, in its own way, nudges us towards a similar perspective. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself to focus on the process, on his actions in the present moment, rather than fixating on outcomes that were often beyond his control. He didn't say, I will rule the empire perfectly and everyone will love me. He focused on, today, I will act with justice, self-control, courage, and wisdom. That's a system, a daily commitment to virtue, regardless of the chaotic external world and its unpredictable events. Clear provides the modern framework for building those kinds of robust internal systems. Perhaps the most powerful insight in Atomic Habits for me was the concept of identity-based habits. It's not about I want to quit smoking. It's about I am not a smoker. It's not I want to write a book. It's I am a writer. This subtle shift from what you want to achieve to who you want to become is revolutionary. When you embrace an identity, your habits become a natural extension of that identity. If I identify as a disciplined coder, then sitting down to refactor that messy piece of code, even when I'd rather scroll through news feeds, becomes less of a chore and more of an affirmation of who I am. It's a profound shift in internal dialogue, from external motivation to internal conviction. Epictetus again speaks to this beautifully. He tells us to decide what kind of person we want to be, and then to live consistently with that character. He talks about assuming the role of a philosopher, and then acting in every situation as that philosopher would act. He urged his students to ask themselves, what would a truly rational and virtuous person do here? This isn't just about surface-level behavior. It's about internalizing a set of principles and letting them guide your smallest actions. Clear, essentially, provides the modern psychological mechanism for building that kind of robust, consistent identity through daily habits, showing us how our smallest actions cast a vote for the person we are becoming. My own struggle with keeping the house tidy, especially with 2 young kids and 2 demanding jobs, illustrates this. For years, my identity wasn't someone who keeps a tidy home. It was more like someone who tries to keep a tidy home, but usually fails. The mess always felt like an uphill battle, a losing fight against chaos. But then I started applying this identity-based thinking. I reframed it. I am a person who values order and peace in my home. This wasn't about spending hours cleaning on a Saturday. It was about making tiny, immediate choices. Put the dirty cup directly into the dishwasher after use. Fold the laundry as soon as it's dry. Don't let it sit. Tidy up one surface before bed. Each small act wasn't just cleaning. It was an affirmation of I am that person. And the cumulative effect, while not resulting in a showroom house, definitely reduced the overall chaos and my stress levels significantly. It wasn't about the goal of a clean house, but the identity of someone who maintains an orderly home, one tiny decision at a time. And of course, Clear brings in the mathematical elegance of compounding, the idea that a mere 1% improvement each day, every day, doesn't just add up, it multiplies. It's not linear growth, it's exponential. This is such a powerful, almost counterintuitive concept. We often crave the dramatic, the overnight success story, the aha moment that changes everything. But true, sustainable growth is rarely like that. It's like saving for retirement. A small amount invested consistently over decades yields incredible, often unbelievable, returns. Or, in the world of IT, it's the continuous integration and small incremental code commits that lead to a stable, robust system, not one massive, untested release. Seneca often spoke about the continuous process of refining oneself, of chipping away at flaws and building virtues, not in a single heroic act, but through daily philosophical practice and self-examination. He knew that wisdom wasn't achieved in a flash of insight, but through persistent, deliberate effort. Clear puts a modern, scientific lens on this ancient truth, showing us the mechanics of how that daily 1% actually works. It's a reassuring thought, especially on days when you feel like you've barely moved the needle. That tiny effort, that single push, that extra 5 minutes of focused work, or that conscious choice to be patient with a difficult colleague, it all contributes to that compounding growth, shaping not just your skill set, but your very character. So, when we talk about James Clear's Atomic Habits, we're not just discussing a book about productivity hacks. We're talking about a profound framework for understanding human behavior, for intentionally designing our lives, and for aligning our actions with the kind of person we aspire to be. It's a roadmap for turning those fleeting intentions into tangible reality, one tiny, powerful choice at a time. It's a reminder that the quiet discipline of a system often trumps the loud ambition of a goal, and that our truest transformations begin with the smallest, most consistent commitments to ourselves. Part 3. Beyond Big Goals. Finding freedom in daily habits. We often hear the rallying cry of ambition. Set big goals. Dream bigger. Reach for the stars. And there's certainly an inspiring energy to that. We look at successful people, at grand achievements, and naturally assume they started with an equally grand vision, a single audacious goal that propelled them forward. But if you peer a little closer, if you read between the lines of those success stories or simply observe your own daily struggles and triumphs, you begin to see that while big goals might provide direction, they are rarely the engine of sustained progress. More often than not, those big shiny goals tend to fade, to become distant echoes in the face of daily demands and inevitable setbacks. What truly lasts, what truly builds momentum and creates lasting change, isn't the goal itself, but the system you live within. It's the almost invisible infrastructure of your daily choices and actions. For me, this realization has been a profound shift in how I approach everything, from my work in IT to how I manage my family life. I used to be a chronic goal setter. Every year, I'd write down a list, learn a new programming language, run a half marathon, read 30 books. And every year, by about March, most of those ambitious goals would feel like heavy burdens, things I should be doing, rather than things I was genuinely progressing towards. The problem wasn't the ambition, it was the strategy. I was fixated on the outcome, on the finish line, and that fixation often made the journey feel overwhelming, especially when life inevitably threw a curveball, a demanding project at work, a sick child, or simply a bout of sheer exhaustion. This is precisely where the wisdom of Epictetus, that incredible Stoic philosopher, steps in with such clarity. He put it so bluntly, so undeniably, and yet so liberatingly. Some things are in our control, and others not. It's a deceptively simple statement, but it holds the key to so much of our anxiety and our peace. Outcomes, he would argue, are often among those things not fully in our control. We can influence them, yes, but we cannot dictate them. Whether I read 30 books this year depends on my actions, but also on whether new projects don't eat up all my evenings, whether my kids don't need me for unexpected things, whether the books I pick up actually hold my interest, and a myriad of other external factors. The half marathon might be derailed by an injury, or simply a stretch of bad weather on training days. These are external, indifferent to my intentions. But what is in our control, Epictetus would remind us, is what we practice each morning, what we choose to do in the immediate present, the effort we put in, the attention we dedicate. These are our actions, our judgments, our responses. These are the elements of our personal system. James Clear in Atomic Habits essentially provides us with the modern playbook for designing these systems. He doesn't dismiss goals entirely. They're useful for setting a direction. But he powerfully argues that the real game changer is focusing on the system that will consistently move you in that direction, regardless of the daily winds. Take my reading habit, for instance. Instead of the crushing goal of read 30 books this year, which felt like a constant race against the clock, I reframed it entirely. My new system became, open a book after I close the laptop for the day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Or, on busier nights, read 1 page before bed. The key wasn't the quantity of pages or books, it was the consistency of the ritual, the establishment of a tiny, almost trivial habit loop. The cue was closing the laptop, signaling the end of work. The craving was a moment of quiet reflection, a mental shift away from screens. The response was picking up a physical book. The reward was the immediate satisfaction of doing something for myself, expanding my mind, and reinforcing the identity of I am a reader. The beauty of this system is its resilience. If I only read 5 pages one night because I'm exhausted, that's perfectly fine. I haven't failed my goal. I've simply executed my system and cast another vote for the person I want to be. The next night, I might read 50 pages. The pressure is gone because the focus is on the controllable act, not the uncontrollable outcome. The feeling of freedom that comes from this shift is incredible. You realize that you're not constantly battling external circumstances or your own fluctuating motivation. You're simply executing a repeatable process that over time will inevitably lead to significant progress. This applies everywhere. Think about the common struggle with inbox management at work. The goal is often clear my inbox to 0. That's a great goal, but it's often dependent on factors outside your control. How many emails you receive, their complexity, the responses you need from others. It's an outcome. A system, however, might be, every morning, before checking anything else, I will process the first 5 emails in my inbox and categorize or respond to them for 10 minutes. That's entirely within your control. You can do that whether you have 50 new emails or 5. And over time, that tiny, consistent action significantly reduces the overwhelming feeling of an overflowing inbox because you're consistently chipping away at it. Or consider a family example. The goal might be have more quality family time. Again, lovely, but vague. What does that even mean, and how do you achieve it amidst the chaos? A system, however, could be, every night during dinner, I will put my phone away and engage in conversation with my kids for the duration of the meal. This is a specific, actionable, controllable habit. It's a system designed to consistently generate those moments of quality family time, even if some dinners are noisier or shorter than others. The outcome is fluid, but the commitment to the process is solid. This idea that systems are where freedom hides might seem counterintuitive at first. We often associate freedom with spontaneity, with an absence of structure. But true freedom, especially in our complex lives, often comes from having a robust internal structure, a reliable set of habits that handle the daily demands, freeing up our mental energy for creative thought, for deeper connection, and for responding to the truly novel challenges that arise. Seneca, another towering figure in Stoicism, often spoke about the importance of daily practice, of self-examination at the end of each day, and of consistently refining one's character. He understood that virtue wasn't a destination reached by a single leap, but a path walked daily through countless small choices and reflections. His philosophical exercises were a system for living well. Marcus Aurelius, too, in his Meditations, repeatedly reminds himself to focus on the present moment, on the task at hand, on acting virtuously in this instant, knowing that the sum of these present virtuous actions would constitute a well-lived life. Clear's Atomic Habits essentially bridges this ancient wisdom with modern behavioral science. He shows us the mechanics of how to build those Seneca-like daily practices, how to structure our environment and our choices so that we consistently vote for the person we want to become. By focusing on the small, controllable elements of our daily systems, we gain a profound sense of agency. We are no longer passively hoping for good outcomes. We are actively, deliberately building the conditions for them. And in that active, deliberate construction of our own daily practice, in the quiet discipline of a well-designed system, we truly find a powerful form of freedom. The freedom from anxiety about external outcomes, and the freedom to consistently shape ourselves into the individuals we aspire to be. It's a quiet revolution, one tiny choice at a time. Part 4. Don't despise what is small. The compounding power of tiny habits. We've been talking about the immense power that hides in our systems, in those repeatable processes that, unlike fleeting goals, are entirely within our control. It's a liberating thought, this shift from obsessing over external outcomes to mastering our internal actions. And this idea brings us beautifully to a core Stoic principle, echoed profoundly in Atomic Habits, the profound significance of the seemingly insignificant. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal reflections that became meditations, frequently reminded himself, Don't despise what is small. Every step contributes to virtue. He wasn't talking about grand, heroic feats or monumental moral dilemmas every day. He was talking about the quiet, consistent effort in the day-to-day, the little choices, the small acts of discipline and wisdom that collectively sculpt our character and build a virtuous life. He understood that virtue wasn't an instant state, but a continuous process of becoming, forged one small choice at a time. Habits work in precisely the same way. We often fall into the trap of thinking that if something isn't going to produce an immediate dramatic change, it's not worth doing. We eye a full workout routine, a comprehensive diet plan, or a massive learning project. And if we can't commit to the whole daunting package, we often just do nothing. But Atomic Habits lays bare the powerful, often counterintuitive truth. A 10-minute jog won't transform your body tonight. A single healthy meal won't instantly make you healthier. Reading one page of a book won't make you a literary genius by morning. Yet, repeat that 10-minute jog for a year, every single day, and your body, your energy levels, and even your mental clarity will undeniably shift. Your mind will quiet, your resilience will grow, and you'll find a steady rhythm in your days. Repeat that one healthy meal, that one page, and the compounding effect over time becomes genuinely transformative. It's like watching a tiny sapling grow into a mighty oak. Each day, the growth is imperceptible, but after years, the change is undeniable. For me, this particular insight from Clear's book, fused with Aurelius's ancient wisdom, brought about a genuinely life-altering shift in my own approach to fitness, which, like many of us, had always been an on-again, off-again struggle. I'd oscillate between ambitious workout plans that lasted a week or two, followed by months of complete inertia and self-recrimination. The goal was always the same: get in shape, lose X pounds, run Y miles. But the systems were always too demanding, too big, too much of a leap from my sedentary reality. After reading Atomic Habits, I decided to embrace the ridiculously small, to truly internalize "don't despise what is small." I started with 2 push-ups before bed. Yes, you heard that right. 2. It felt laughably small, almost pointless. My internal critic scoffed, "What's the difference 2 push-ups will make? This is silly." But I remembered Clear's argument about making it so easy you can't say no, and Aurelius's emphasis on the single step. The act of doing 2 push-ups was trivial. It took perhaps 10 seconds. There was no sweat, no muscle soreness, no real physical exertion to speak of. But here's the magic. It created a tiny victory. Every night, no matter how tired I was, no matter how chaotic the day had been, I could always find 10 seconds for 2 push-ups. And in that consistent act, something subtle but profound began to shift. The first week, it was just 2 push-ups. The second week, sometimes I'd do 3, then 4. Then I started wondering, what if I did them in the morning too? It wasn't about willpower anymore. It was about the ease of the habit and the quiet satisfaction of showing up. After a few months, those 2 push-ups had slowly, almost imperceptibly, compounded into a short daily bodyweight routine. I wasn't just doing push-ups. I was doing planks, squats, and a few minutes of stretching. And then one day, I found myself thinking, maybe I could actually go for that 10-minute jog. The jog itself didn't feel like a monumental effort because the pathway to it had been paved by months of tiny, consistent actions. The compounding effect wasn't just physical, though the physical changes were certainly welcome. More importantly, it was psychological. That daily commitment, however small, built a sense of self-efficacy. It was a daily reminder that I could commit to something and see it through. This translated into increased confidence, not just in my physical abilities, but in my ability to tackle other challenges. I found I had more energy throughout the day, which meant less reliance on that afternoon coffee and less brain fog during demanding work meetings. And perhaps most surprisingly, I found I had more patience. More patience with myself when a complex piece of code wasn't compiling, and critically, more patience with my kids when they were testing the boundaries of my sanity. It was as if the physical discipline, the quiet act of showing up for myself, had created a deeper reservoir of resilience that spilled over into all areas of my life. This is the often overlooked secret of tiny habits. Their impact is rarely confined to their initial domain. A small habit to improve your health can boost your energy, which improves your focus at work, which reduces stress, which makes you a more patient parent or partner. It creates a virtuous cycle where one positive change gently nudges another into existence. Clear meticulously explains the science behind this compounding effect, not just in terms of mathematical growth. 1% better each day compounds to 37 times better over a year. But also in terms of how our brain wires itself, how our identity shifts with each vote we cast for who we want to be. He talks about the valley of disappointment, where we expect linear progress and get discouraged when we don't see immediate results. This is where most people quit. They despise the small. They dismiss the effort because the change isn't dramatic enough. But if you push through that valley, if you trust the system and the compounding effect, the results eventually arrive, often suddenly, and feel like a breakthrough, when in reality, they were the inevitable outcome of hundreds of tiny, consistent efforts. Seneca, with his pragmatic approach to self-improvement, would have understood this implicitly. He urged his students not to wait for grand opportunities to practice virtue, but to seize every small moment to act with reason and integrity. Every choice to be temperate, to be kind, to be rational, even in the most mundane interactions, was a building block of character. He understood that our moral muscle is strengthened not by occasional heavy lifts, but by daily, consistent exercise. So, when Marcus Aurelius told himself not to despise what is small, he was giving voice to a universal truth that James Clear has eloquently re-articulated for our modern age. It's a reminder that the magnificent outcomes we aspire to are not built on monumental sacrifices, but on the accumulated weight of countless small, persistent efforts. The grandeur of your future self isn't forged in a single blazing moment, but in the quiet, consistent discipline of your daily routines. It's about respecting the power of the single push-up, the single page, the single moment of patience, knowing that each one is a vote for the person you are becoming, quietly, powerfully, and enduringly. Part 5. Seneca and Atomic Habits. Living in harmony with yourself. We've explored how the ridiculously small, consistently applied, can lead to astonishingly large results. My 2 push-ups before bed, seemingly insignificant, quietly compounded into something far greater than just physical improvement. They began to subtly shape my confidence, my energy, and even my patience with my children. But there's another layer to this, a deeper shift that Atomic Habits illuminates so brilliantly, and it's a concept that resonates with the very core of Stoic philosophy. It's about why we persist with these small changes and what truly makes them stick, transforming from a fleeting resolution into an integral part of who we are. Seneca, with his keen understanding of human nature, once wrote something that has always stuck with me. The wise man is content with himself. This isn't about arrogance or self-congratulation. It's about inner harmony, about a deep alignment between one's values, one's chosen character, and one's actions. It's about not being in conflict with yourself, not having that constant internal tug of war between what you say you want to do and what you actually end up doing. For so long, my attempts at self-improvement, whether it was fitness or learning, felt like I was constantly forcing myself. It was always, I must run, or I should read more, or I have to clear my inbox. That language of obligation, of external pressure, inevitably bred resentment and resistance within me. It felt like I was perpetually battling against my own inclinations, and frankly, that's an exhausting way to live. This is where James Clear's concept of identity-based habits truly shines, offering a practical pathway to Seneca's ideal of being content with himself. Clear argues that real, sustainable change isn't about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. It's about aligning your actions with the kind of person you genuinely want to be. The profound shift occurs when you stop focusing on what you want to achieve and instead start focusing on who you want to become. Think about my running example. For years, the thought process was, I need to run to get fit. The goal was external, a number on the scale or a faster mile time. And because that goal felt distant and often challenging, the daily act of lacing up my shoes felt like a chore, an obligation imposed from the outside. There was always that internal voice saying, you don't really want to do this. You could just sit on the sofa. What's the point today? And more often than not, that voice won. But Atomic Habits helped me reframe this entirely. It wasn't about, I must run. It became, I am someone who takes care of his health. Or, more specifically, I am someone who integrates movement into his daily life. This isn't just semantic trickery, it's a fundamental shift in motivation. When your habits reflect your identity, they stop feeling like chores. They become an honest expression of who you genuinely believe yourself to be. Suddenly, the decision to go for a short jog or to do my growing bodyweight routine wasn't a battle of willpower. It was simply what someone who takes care of his health does. It became a natural, almost inevitable action that reinforced my self-image. It wasn't about hitting a specific mileage. It was about showing up consistently as that person. Each time I chose movement, I wasn't just working out. I was casting a vote for my desired identity. And the more votes I cast, the more robust and undeniable that identity became. This shift has been revolutionary across various aspects of my life. As a father, I used to feel guilty about not spending enough quality time with my kids. The goal was vague and often led to forced, overplanned activities that sometimes felt more stressful than fun. The chore of it all was exhausting. But then I reframed it. I am a present and engaged father. This meant that when my youngest would bring me a Lego creation, my habit wasn't to quickly glance and nod while still halfway focused on my phone. My habit became putting my phone down, looking them in the eye, and engaging for a few minutes, even if it meant a slight delay in whatever I was doing. It wasn't a chore. It was an authentic expression of who I wanted to be in that moment. It became integrated into my daily rhythm, less about quality time and more about quality presence. In my professional life, particularly in IT, the constant learning curve can be daunting. New technologies emerge daily, and the pressure to keep up is immense. For a long time, my approach was, I need to learn X framework. This often resulted in sporadic, intense bursts of study followed by long periods of neglecting it. It felt like a heavy burden. But when I shifted to I'm a lifelong learner and a capable technologist, the habits changed. Instead of trying to cram, it became about making small, consistent efforts. 5 minutes reading documentation before I start coding. Subscribing to a relevant tech blog and reading one article during my coffee break. Experimenting with a small piece of code for 10 minutes in the evening. These weren't monumental tasks. They were simply what a capable technologist does to maintain their edge. They became an inherent part of my professional identity, making the process of continuous learning feel less like an imposed task and more like a natural aspect of my craft. Seneca, in his letters, often speaks about the importance of living in alignment with reason and nature. When our actions are driven by our deep-seated values and the identity we consciously cultivate, there's less internal friction. The wise person isn't someone who constantly fights against themselves. They are someone whose desires, thoughts, and actions are in harmony. This internal coherence, this freedom from self-conflict, is what brings true contentment. Clear provides the practical blueprint for achieving this by making our desired identities the gravitational center around which our habits orbit. The profound beauty of this is that it flips the script on discipline. Discipline often conjures images of white-knuckled willpower, of gritting your teeth and pushing through resistance. But when your habits are identity-based, when they are an expression of who you are, they require less raw willpower. They become easier, more automatic, and ultimately more enjoyable. The internal dialogue shifts from I have to do this to I get to do this, or even this is just what I do. That's a powerful and liberating change. For me, as a man juggling the demands of work and family, striving to live well and authentically, this concept of identity-based habits has been a game changer. It means that my actions as a father, a partner, a professional, and simply as a human being are not random or externally imposed. They are increasingly an honest and consistent expression of me, the person I aspire to be, the values I hold, the character I am continually trying to build. And in that alignment, in that quiet congruence of action and identity, I find a deeper sense of peace, purpose, and yes, contentment. It's not about being perfect or achieving some unattainable ideal, but about the steady, consistent process of becoming more fully myself, one small, intentional choice at a time. It truly is one of the most powerful insights I've taken from Atomic Habits, and it echoes the timeless wisdom of those ancient Stoics who understood that living well is fundamentally about living in harmony with yourself. Part 6. Habits as Daily Exercises of Character, Our Modern Meditations. We've journeyed through the idea that our biggest transformations stem from the smallest, most consistent actions, and that these actions gain their power when they align with the identity we choose to embody. It's a powerful framework, one that bridges the ancient wisdom of Stoicism with modern behavioral science. And as I reflect on this fusion, there's a quiet, profound beauty that emerges from it all. The realization that our habits, in their essence, are nothing less than daily exercises of character. They are, in a very real sense, our personal philosophy expressed in action, rather than just in thought. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, understood this deeply. He didn't write his meditations for publication or for an audience. These were his private notes to himself, his spiritual exercises, his daily reminders to live in line with virtue, with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. He often penned these thoughts at dawn before the demands of his empire descended, or sometimes in the quiet solitude of his military camp amidst the chaos of war. He was literally journaling his way to a more virtuous existence, deliberately shaping his mind and actions through consistent reflection and internal commitment. He was, in effect, creating a system for living well, a daily habit of philosophical self-correction. And what Atomic Habits helps us realize is that our own daily habits, how we eat, how we speak, how we focus our attention, how we interact with our families, how we approach our work, are our own meditations, but written in action, not just in words. Every choice, every routine, however small, is a practical declaration of who we are and what we value. Think about it. When I choose to put my phone away at dinner and genuinely listen to my children, that's not just a polite social gesture. That's a practical exercise in the Stoic virtue of attentiveness, of being present, of showing respect for the moment and the people in it. It's a tiny vote for the identity of present and engaged father. It's my active meditation on connection. When I choose to tackle the most important task at work for 15 focused minutes before diving into my email inbox, that's not just a productivity hack. It's a practical exercise in self-discipline, in prioritizing what matters, in managing my attention. It's my active meditation on purpose and effectiveness. When I consistently choose the whole grain option over the sugary snack, even when I'm craving something sweet, that's not merely a dietary choice. It's a practical exercise in temperance, in exercising control over my impulses, in valuing long-term health over immediate gratification. It's my active meditation on moderation and self-care. This perspective brings a new depth and dignity to our everyday routines. They cease to be mundane, tiresome obligations and transform into opportunities for conscious character development. They become the fertile ground where our philosophical ideals take root and grow. Epictetus, too, was relentless in his emphasis on practice. He taught that philosophy wasn't just abstract ideas to be debated in a lecture hall. It was a way of life, a daily regimen of applying reason to every situation. He would have us ask ourselves, not just, what would a wise person think, but what would a wise person do in this situation? Our habits are the answers to that question, lived out in real time. For me, this realization was incredibly freeing. I used to feel that to be philosophical or virtuous, I needed to be constantly reading dense texts or engaging in deep, abstract contemplation. And while those things have their place, this shift in perspective showed me that the most powerful philosophy is lived, not just read. My busy life, with its endless demands and small decisions, became a continuous laboratory for character building. The constant juggle of work deadlines, school pickups, grocery runs, and trying to remember which child needs what for their next activity. These aren't just obstacles to a philosophical life. They are the philosophical life. They are the arena where my virtues are tested and honed. Every time I take a deep breath instead of snapping at a colleague, that's an exercise in patience. Every time I manage my time effectively to deliver on a promise, that's an exercise in integrity. Every time I choose quiet reflection over mindless distraction, that's an exercise in wisdom. Clear's framework for habit formation, making habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, provides the practical tools for us to design these daily character exercises. It's one thing to know that patience is a virtue. It's another to set up a system that makes it easier for you to practice patience in your daily interactions. For example, if I tend to get impatient when caught in traffic, my system might be to always have an interesting podcast ready to go, or to use that time for a short, intentional breathing exercise. This makes the habit of cultivating patience more attractive and easier to implement, rather than relying solely on willpower in a moment of frustration. The Stoics understood that true strength doesn't come from suppressing emotions, but from training the mind to respond wisely to them. Our habits are this training. They are the repeated, incremental strengthening of our capacity for virtue. They are the constant, quiet work of sculpting our inner citadel, piece by tiny piece. So, when Marcus Aurelius sat down, whether at dawn or in the camp, and penned his meditations, he was engaging in a profound act of self-improvement, of character formation. And when we, in our own chaotic, demanding lives, consciously choose to build a small habit, whether it's reading a page, doing a few push-ups, or pausing before we react, we are doing something remarkably similar. We are, in our own way, writing our own meditations in the very fabric of our days, shaping our character, not just through lofty ideals, but through the honest, persistent practice of living. Part 7, Practical Takeaway. Asking the right question for sustainable change. So after all this talk about systems over goals, the compounding effect of tiny changes, and how our habits are really just daily exercises of character, what's the tangible takeaway? What's the practical shift we can make right now, amidst the overflowing inbox and the never-ending to-do list? It distills down to a simple, yet profoundly powerful question that reorients our entire approach to personal growth. Maybe, just maybe, don't ask yourself, what big, audacious goal am I chasing that will transform my life? Instead, try asking, what tiny, almost laughably small action can I take today that reflects the kind of person I want to be? This isn't a trick question or some kind of philosophical riddle. It's a pragmatic invitation to simplify, to reduce the friction, and to bring our aspirations down to earth, into the realm of the immediately achievable. It's about taking the grand, inspiring vision you hold for yourself and breaking it down into its atomic components. The beauty of this question is its accessibility. It sidesteps the often paralyzing enormity of big goals and focuses on the concrete, the immediate, the controllable. It brings us squarely back to Epictetus's enduring wisdom. Focus on what is within your control. And in any given moment, the tiny action you choose to take is entirely within your control. Let's consider a few examples of what that tiny action could look like in our busy lives. It could be as simple as 2 minutes of journaling. For many, the idea of keeping a journal conjures images of long, eloquent prose, detailed daily accounts, and deep existential musings. A daunting commitment. But what if it was just 2 minutes? Just enough time to jot down one thought, one feeling, one gratitude, or one intention for the day. For me, that's often meant simply opening a plain text file on my computer before the first meeting of the day and typing 3 bullet points: what I'm grateful for, what my priority is, and one thing I want to improve. It's not elegant, it's not literature, but those 2 minutes are my personal micro-meditation. They're my moment to pause, to check in with myself, to deliberately direct my attention, as Epictetus would advise. They're a tiny vote for the identity of I am a reflective person. I am someone who tries to live with intention. And the compounding effect? Over weeks and months, these tiny entries become a quiet chronicle of my internal landscape, a record of growth, a source of insight I never would have gained by simply thinking about journaling. It becomes sustainable precisely because it asks so little, yet gives so much. Or perhaps, that tiny action today could be as simple as taking the stairs instead of the elevator or escalator. It seems almost too trivial to mention, doesn't it? What difference will one flight of stairs make? On its own, physically, not much. But as a consistent daily practice, it's a silent affirmation. It's a vote for the identity of I am someone who chooses movement, who prioritizes my physical well-being. It's a small, manageable expenditure of effort that, when repeated day in and day out, contributes to physical energy, mental alertness, and a sense of quiet accomplishment. I work in an office building with several floors, and for years I instinctively went for the elevator, especially when carrying my laptop bag. It was the path of least resistance. But then I started to consciously think, what would someone who prioritizes their health do here? The answer was always the stairs. It's not about being an Olympic athlete. It's about making the easier, healthier choice the default, thereby making it attractive and easy in the long run. The initial thought might be, ugh, stairs. But the consistent action slowly rewires that response. You start to see the stairs not as a burden, but as an opportunity, a tiny, consistent act of self-care. And the energy boost, the cleared head before a meeting, becomes the small reward that reinforces the habit. Another powerful tiny action, especially relevant in our complex relationships, could be choosing to listen instead of immediately reacting. How many times do we find ourselves in conversations, whether with a colleague or a family member, already formulating our response before the other person has even finished speaking? It's a common human tendency, driven by our desire to be heard, to be right, to solve problems. But it often leads to misunderstandings, friction, and missed opportunities for genuine connection. A tiny action here could be, before I respond, I will take one silent breath and genuinely try to understand what the other person is saying without judgment or interruption. This isn't easy, of course. It requires conscious effort, especially when emotions are running high. But it's entirely within our control. This small act of mindful listening is a practical exercise in empathy, a core Stoic virtue related to justice and kindness. It's a vote for the identity of, I am a good communicator. I am a compassionate listener. I've tried to implement this, especially with my kids. When they're upset or trying to tell me something, my instinct is often to jump in with a solution or a correction. But pausing, taking that breath, and just letting them finish, sometimes even repeating back what I heard, has made a profound difference. It doesn't always solve the problem immediately, but it always deepens the connection. And that's a far more valuable outcome. The Stoics understood that our reactions are often where we lose our footing, where we cede control to external events. By deliberately cultivating a habit of pausing and listening, we are practicing self-mastery, bringing reason to bear on our emotional impulses. The critical insight here, the one that James Clear hammers home so effectively, is that small doesn't mean insignificant. It means sustainable. This is the crux of the matter. We often equate impact with size, believing that only grand gestures can yield significant results. But this overlooks the power of compounding. A tiny action, consistently performed, accumulates into monumental change over time, far exceeding what a sporadic, heroic effort could achieve. It's the difference between trying to drain a swimming pool with a bucket once a week and consistently running a small drip every single day. The drip will win. The sustainability aspect is key because it bypasses the need for Herculean willpower, which, let's be honest, is a finite resource for most of us, especially when we're already stretched thin by life's demands. When an action is small, it creates less resistance. It feels less like a burden and more like a gentle nudge. This reduces decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion that comes from constantly having to decide whether to do something difficult. Instead, the small action becomes almost automatic, part of the background hum of your daily existence. Seneca would have praised this approach, urging us not to wait for grand opportunities to practice virtue, but to find it in the everyday. He knew that the wise person builds their character through consistent daily philosophical practice, not through isolated acts of brilliance. Our character, our peace of mind, our overall well-being, these aren't built in flashes of inspiration. They are constructed in the quiet, consistent discipline of the small, sustainable actions we choose to take, day in and day out. So, next time you feel overwhelmed by a big goal or discouraged by a perceived lack of progress, just pause. Take a breath, and then ask yourself, what tiny action today can I take that aligns with who I truly want to be? You might be surprised by the power of that small answer. It's the starting point for everything. Part 8. Expanding the Toolkit. Complementary reads for deeper insight. If the ideas we've been discussing, the quiet power of tiny habits, the wisdom of focusing on systems over goals, and the transformative shift to identity-based change resonate with you, then you're already on a path of profound self-discovery and improvement. Atomic Habits is truly a cornerstone book for anyone looking to intentionally shape their life. But the beauty of these concepts is that they connect to a broader tapestry of wisdom, both ancient and modern. If you're hungry for more, if you want to deepen your understanding of the underlying psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy that make these small actions so powerful, there are a few other books that I've found to be incredibly complementary, each offering a unique lens to enrich this picture. One of the first books that comes to mind, almost as a prerequisite for truly sustained habit formation, is Carol Dweck's Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Where Clear gives us the how of habit change, Dweck offers the critical attitude that sustains those habits through inevitable challenges and setbacks. She introduces us to the powerful distinction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you believe your abilities and intelligence are static. You're born with a certain amount, and that's that. Failure is a direct indictment of your inherent worth. With a growth mindset, however, you understand that your abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Failure becomes an opportunity to learn, a stepping stone rather than a dead end. For anyone trying to build new habits, especially those small, consistent ones that don't show immediate results, a growth mindset is indispensable. If I'm doing my 2 push-ups and find myself struggling, a fixed mindset might say, "See, you're just not a fit person." A growth mindset, however, would say, "Okay, that was tough today, but I showed up and I'll learn from this and keep going." This resilient attitude is what allows you to push through the valley of disappointment that Clear describes, the period where you're putting in the work but not yet seeing the visible results. Without that underlying belief in your capacity to grow, any new habit, however atomic, is vulnerable to abandonment at the first sign of difficulty. Dweck's work essentially builds the mental scaffolding upon which atomic habits can truly thrive, ensuring that you approach the process with curiosity and perseverance rather than rigid self-judgment. Then there's Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. While Clear's book offers an elegant, prescriptive framework for building new habits, Duhigg's delves deep into the neuroscience and psychology of why habits exist in the first place and how they operate in our brains. He breaks down the habit loop: cue, routine, reward. Understanding this loop is fundamental. The cue is the trigger, that feeling of boredom, seeing a particular object, a time of day. The routine is the habit itself, checking your phone, biting your nails, going for a run, and the reward is the satisfaction or relief you get from performing the routine. Duhigg provides compelling stories from individuals, corporations, and even social movements to illustrate how deeply ingrained these loops are. For me, understanding the cue routine reward loop was crucial for both breaking bad habits and forming good ones. It helped me recognize, for example, that my evening mindless scrolling habit wasn't just about wanting to see what was happening online. The cue was often simply closing my work laptop, signaling a transition. The routine was picking up my phone. The reward was a momentary escape, a hit of novelty, a sense of winding down, however superficial. Once I understood the underlying loop, I could start to deliberately change the routine. For instance, by immediately picking up a book, the new routine, instead of the phone, to get a similar but healthier reward of winding down. Duhigg provides the scientific backstory that makes Clear's practical advice even more robust, giving you a deeper appreciation for the intricate machinery of your own behavior. Finally, if you're looking to apply these principles to the increasingly challenging landscape of focus and productivity in our modern, distracted world, I highly recommend Cal Newport's Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. Newport takes the idea of cultivating intentional habits and applies it specifically to the realm of cognitive work. He argues that in an age of constant notifications and shallow engagement, the ability to perform deep work, focused, uninterrupted concentration on a single, cognitively demanding task, is becoming an increasingly rare and valuable skill. He offers practical strategies and habits for building a deep work practice, essentially showing you how to construct systems that protect your attention and allow for sustained focus. For someone like me, working in IT, where distractions are a constant barrage, Newport's insights have been invaluable. He's not just talking about willpower. He's talking about building habits of intense focus, scheduling specific times for deep work, designing your environment to minimize distraction, and creating rituals that signal to your brain it's time to concentrate. His ideas align perfectly with the Stoic emphasis on controlling one's attention and directing it towards what is truly important, rather than allowing it to be pulled by external noise. Marcus Aurelius, battling the distractions of empire, would have deeply understood the value of cultivating such mental discipline. These 3 books, alongside Atomic Habits, form a powerful toolkit for intentional living. Mindset provides the foundational belief system. The Power of Habit offers the scientific understanding of why habits work. Atomic Habits gives you the actionable framework for how to build them. And Deep Work shows you how to apply that framework to master your focus in a world designed to fragment it. Each one, in its own way, echoes the Stoic call to self-mastery, to living deliberately, and to shaping our inner world through conscious choices and consistent practice. They are not quick fixes, but rather guides for a lifelong journey of self-improvement, built one tiny, intentional step at a time. Together, they paint a comprehensive picture of how to live a more focused, productive, and ultimately, a more fulfilling life. Part 9. The core truth. It all comes down to this. Small acts, done daily, quietly decide who you become. They may feel insignificant in the moment. A page read, a deep breath before responding, a few steps taken instead of the elevator. But over time, they write the story of your life. The person you hope to be tomorrow is already being shaped by the choices you make today. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Part 10. From personal habits to organizational systems. Looking ahead. We've spent our time together reflecting on how those small acts, done daily, quietly and powerfully decide who you become. It's a truth that has resonated through the centuries, from the Stoic philosophers to modern behavioral scientists like James Clear. The journey of self-improvement, of building a life aligned with our values and the person we aspire to be, isn't about grand, sweeping gestures, but about the consistent, often imperceptible choices we make moment by moment. It's about recognizing that the accumulation of those tiny habits is far more potent than any burst of monumental effort. We've seen how a shift from I must run to I am someone who takes care of his health can transform a chore into an expression of identity. How 2 push-ups can compound into greater confidence and patience, and how our daily routines are, in effect, our own living meditations. But what happens when we zoom out from the individual? What happens when this profound understanding of systems and habits is applied not just to one person's life, but to a team, a department, or even an entire organization? Because just as our personal lives are shaped by the sum of our individual habits, the collective output and culture of any group of people is fundamentally determined by the systems they operate within and the habits they collectively practice. It's a natural progression of this very idea. If the atomic habits within us sculpt our character, then the atomic habits between us, the routines and systems we establish together, sculpt the character of our shared endeavors. Think about it in the context of our work. In the world of IT, for instance, a single engineer's habit of meticulously documenting code or performing thorough code reviews might seem like a small thing, but when that habit is adopted across an entire team, it builds a robust system of quality control, reduces errors, and fosters a culture of shared responsibility and excellence. It compounds not just into better code, but into a more efficient, less stressful, and ultimately more successful team. This is precisely where our next exploration will lead us. We'll be turning our attention to a book that delves into this very concept, The Systems Leader. It's a book that explores how systems thinking doesn't just change individuals, but can reshape whole organizations, allowing them to navigate complexity, adapt to change, and achieve sustainable impact in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. we'll examine how the principles of designing effective systems, much like the ones we've discussed for personal habits, can be scaled up to foster environments where collective action is optimized, where teams are more resilient, and where long-term vision is translated into consistent, effective collective practice. It's about moving beyond individual efforts and understanding how to influence the interconnected components of a larger whole, creating an organizational culture where good habits are not just encouraged, but are built into the very fabric of how things are done. For the Stoics, the idea of living in harmony wasn't just about individual peace, but also about our role in the larger community, the cosmopolis. They understood that individual virtue contributes to collective well-being. The systems leader offers a modern lens on how to intentionally design that collective well-being through thoughtful, systemic approaches within our professional lives. So, if today's reflection on the quiet power of tiny choices resonated with you, if you found yourself nodding along, recognizing the patterns in your own life and work, then I invite you to continue this journey with us. Your engagement truly helps us to keep bringing you these thoughtful stories and Stoic insights, connecting ancient wisdom with the very real demands of our modern lives. If you feel inclined, a simple like and subscribe to the channel would mean a great deal. It's one of those small daily acts that helps our community grow, allowing us to share these ideas with more people who might find meaning in them. And of course, if you want to go deeper, if you want to truly immerse yourself in the practical genius of habit formation, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up a copy of Atomic Habits. The book itself holds far more richness, more detailed strategies, and more nuanced understanding than any summary can capture. It's a roadmap you can return to again and again, finding new insights as you navigate your own journey of becoming. Until then, remember that the smallest actions often cast the longest shadows, quietly shaping not just your tomorrow, but the very essence of who you are and what you create.